I'm Elisabeth Nunziato. This is Dr. Hakan Ozcelik. And today we're going to talk about our wisdom cue, creating aesthetic expressions. Dr. Ozcelik, tell us a little bit about what we'll see.
Creating aesthetic expressions when we are angry can be very important because anger can be a very nasty thing. When somebody gets angry, they can get out of control, they can be intimidating, they can be someone that we don't want to get close to, we don't want to listen to. We talk about that a lot. But at the same time, what we have also talked about in our earlier episodes is that how important it is to express our anger properly if it's for the right reason. So in that sense, creating aesthetic in our anger expressions is almost a necessity especially if we are leading an organization.
And we're going to learn about this from Dr. Robin Fisher again today, yes?
Yes, and the reason for that is it looks like we got a lot to learn from music, and particularly in our case from Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which is considered as being one of the angriest pieces in music history. And this is also a music that people love to listen. They find it very engaging, very exciting, very provoking. Cathartic. So she will explain us why we love listening anger in that piece, right, so that we can draw some insights about how leaders can use those techniques to express their own anger.
And this is Dr. Robin Fisher.
The title of this symphony in his own hand is The Fate Symphony. You will hear short, emphatic statements, bum, 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 in a minor key. That alone conveys ominous anger, ominous brooding, perhaps. You'll hear tension in long notes. It was not customary in symphonic music of the time to hold notes for an indeterminate amount of time. And Wagner commented later on Beethoven's composition saying, if you don't hold those notes long enough, you're not getting at what Beethoven wanted. He wanted tension. You'll hear agitation in energetic echoes of the theme, the layering of the theme. You'll hear it over and over in a flurry of notes, very unsettled. You'll hear passion as the statement, bum, 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 is restated in the major key rather than the minor key, as if to say, no, fate, you are not going to take me down. I'm coming back. You'll hear the fiery part of Beethoven's voice in how he gets high notes and low notes. He goes from the highest parts of those instruments' ranges down to the very lowest, as if to say, the universe is a huge thing, but I can handle it. And then at the end of this excerpt that Hakan will play for you, we hear a transcendence. As the theme arrives in a new tonality, you hear even a happy melody. This period in Beethoven's composition is called the heroic phase. And I think as you travel through this brief excerpt from brooding, sadness, depression, anger, agitation into transcendence, you'll understand the hero in Beethoven. Bravo, Beethoven, right? Yes, yes. If I were to briefly connect that to the business world and organizational structures and opportunities for communication, I would say that the ability to state strong emotion and restate it and perhaps elaborate on it and find ways to develop it, layer it, get it out there, and then transcend to a higher understanding is what I feel that excerpt means to us.
So, Dr. Ozcelik, how can we apply these concepts to the workplace?
So music is a language, and with that language comes with different techniques such as intonations, the pitches, the timing, the notes, and when they all come together, they create a sense of pleasure even if what's being expressed is anger. So if you take that from music to an organizational environment, and I think one good way to do that would be just to give an example of an organization leader who is really sensitive about diversity, and he or she wants to make sure that insulting others based on their ethnic origin is not acceptable in this organization. The leader has different choices to get that message across. One choice would be to talk about it a little bit in general language and then not doing anything about it. Or the other end would be an outburst in an incident where somebody actually literally
Created an offense.
And neither of which would be functional for a leader, because in the former, the leader doesn't really making a strong statement, and in the latter, the leader is making a statement that's too loud. So instead of doing that, the leader can, for instance, take that incident as an input and maybe give a quick response to that at the time without outbursting, and then time their anger and diffuse their anger to different segments, and then make sure that they bring that issue up again and again at different times with different tones, with different behaviors and different strategies, so it's consistent, but it's not monotonous. So it could be a speech that they are giving to their employees, and he can make a little, or she can make a little reference to that. Or it could be in an executive meeting, can make a statement about it. Or it could be a real decision making, a new policy that's being written, make a big statement out there that diversity is our norm, so we have to respect it. We have to make sure that everybody understands that insults are not acceptable. Or he or she can bring some personal stories at times when talking with other employees one-on-one.
And again, we return to storytelling here as a really powerful tool.
And storytelling with rhythm, with intonation, and with different pitches, with different emotional tones, in addition to anger.
And a positive resolution.
So when they all come together, then this leader is creating a climate of diversity just because of that strategic use of anger. So now what's really interesting is we really wanted to test it out, that assumption, by comparing this with Beethoven's Fifth Symphony with Martin Luther's I Have a Dream speech. And we asked Robin Fisher to tell us about the comparison. So now let's turn to that. So Robin, my question is, what are the parallels between this speech and Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? Because this is, I think, one of the most profound pieces of a leadership speech that comes very close to music. Or like
Beethoven would have loved it. One of the seminal moments in that speech is the Symphony of Brotherhood. And he starts the speech by talking about making the rough places plain, every valley shall be exalted. So the concept of taking dissonance and discord and turning it into harmony and cooperation. So even in his voice, Dr. King had such a musical way of declaiming and presenting. You hear music in his voice, you hear agitation, you can hear the struggle that he is portraying in his actual speaking voice. And you know that the culmination of this speech is his vision of the Symphony of Brotherhood.
So there is something then what we call aesthetics in anger, because this is an aesthetic speech. It's a beautiful speech, and yet it conveys a lot of anger in such a way that we want to hear it again and again. So then we can learn a lot from music as leaders about how we can express our anger to others.
And the thing that I really feel is pertinent is the concept that you can make an emphatic statement as a person who is angry or has a grievance, but it doesn't have to be a dead end, neither for you nor for the listener. And that as you continue to repeat or restate your grievance, you can use your creative mind to extrapolate and enhance and explore with another person who is willing to listen and work with you. And together, through that process, you can transcend the grievance or the problem or the conflict and reach a resolution that is harmony.
Talk about creating a powerful aesthetic expression. That is one of the finest examples I think Robin could have used for all of us. Can you maybe help us understand the takeaway and what we can import now into our work lives?
So aesthetic is a word that sounds almost counterintuitive to anger when we think about the first time, but after all these materials that we are bringing here, by using a wisdom lens, I think we are making a statement here that whenever we are angry, it's important that we also think about aesthetics, almost at the same time. I'm bubbling, I'm so angry about this. How can I express that in a way that people will actually appreciate what I will express?
And connect with.
And connect with. And organizational leaders and those who make a great change in their organizations do that a lot. And I think it will be really interesting to hear some of their stories in the future. And also, it's important to find ways to pace our anger and then find those pitches. At the same time, find those different forms and intensities and create some variations around those. That's important. Now I'm going to play the devil's advocate again. What is the opposite side of this? Because now we know that creating that variety in anger expression is functional. But what if there is no variety? That somebody gets angry at something or someone and gets stuck with that anger for days, for weeks, for years, for a long lifetime. So how can we avoid getting stuck with anger in organizations? This is going to be our question in our next segment.
This is Work-Life Wisdom. We are pursuing wiser organizational experiences, one question at a time.